Welcome to this short session on microlearning. What does it mean and how to use it? My name is John Dillon, and welcome to this Educator's Corner. In addition to being an educator for over 40 years, I'm also the product development manager at C3 SoftWorks. Let's go ahead and just kind of talk about it a little bit, and I'll show you an example at the end, an example of a session I created for microlearning. Here's the thing I've learned with microlearning. First of all, it is probably the most popular buzzword lately in the last couple of years. Really, as you really start looking at it from a lot of different sites, it really has many different interpretations depending on who you're listening to, who has a PhD, and their perspective on it. And really, it's kind of like a wheel. What does it mean? Is it, short, is self-paced? There's quizzes, there's a video, is it, only instructor-led? What does it mean? And I think that's where it kind of gets gray and can mean many different things to different people. So I decided to look at this from my perspective of how I view microlearning and how I've used it for years and years as a presenter. Microlearning means, again, a lot of different things, to different people. But I will say microlearning really has two key focuses. One is it's focused, and typically it's short. And so those are the two key things I think almost everybody will agree with when it comes to microlearning. There's a lot of other things that are debatable. I'm not going to get into this really depth, but one of the things is it's kind of across the platforms. They talk about interactive quizzes. I totally 100% agree with that statement. Short form videos, as I indicated, in a way, this video is kind of like microlearning. It's focused and it's short, and it's talking about one specific thing. Gamification. I'm all about gamification, leaderboards, or using that to really emphasize key teaching points I want the students to know. So again, microlearning can be done in many different formats. So real quick, let's talk about the 70-20-10 model of learning and how it applies to microlearning. One of the things I've always embraced is the 70%, and that really is kind of referred to as the doer. Having people do hands-on and participating, they're going to get more out of that session than by a traditional lecture. If they can get the opportunity to problem solve and receive additional feedback as they go, this is going to be the most helpful, and personally, I find it a very effective way to deliver content. The 20% learner represents what we call the sharer. And this is sharing information with peer interactions and maybe involves coaching. Really, it's more of a give and take, probably in a classroom setting. The 10% is what we refer to as the learner. And this is what you see in traditional college settings or more of a structured training format. It's not to say it's not effective, but combining it with the 20 to 70% rule really kind of helps balance it out. I personally lean more towards the 70 and the 20% in any training that I do. The more interactive I can make it, the more feedback I get from my students, and the more information I can give them real time will help make me a much more effective trainer. Two key elements I want to talk about is turning on gamification to boost your engagement. And this really goes hand in hand with quizzes. You can certainly do quizzes that can reinforce points, or you can do a quiz in the form of a game format that accomplishes pretty much the same thing. The difference is you can do it self-paced or instructor-led, and depending on how you create the course, you can do either. One of the things that I remember when I was teaching in the workplace, and I worked for a public safety department, police, fire, and EMS, one of the things I got criticized by some co-instructors was I was really focusing my training towards the adult learner. Some of these instructors were thinking things should be like college. When I'm teaching in a college environment, which I've done, I can hold students to a different standard. But I really didn't. I always focused on the adult learner mentality. Let's make it painless. Let's get in there, teach them what they need to know, and hopefully they walk away with a few key teaching points. And sometimes people that come from a more structured educational view thinks that's really dumbing down education. I disagree. I'm really going to be focused. I want them to walk away with 2 or 3 key points. Sometimes less is definitely better. I like short bursts of training. I like it to be very focused, and I want my students to walk away with 2 key points from this 5 to 10 minute training session. So now I want to go ahead and show you an example of a microlearning session that I created and just talk about some of the questions I created. In my example here, I'm going to use a game called Billionaire from the Bravo Zone, which is similar to Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but it has a little bit more different interactions and different question formats than the traditional television show, which makes it unique. I have 7 questions. So again, keeping in line with keeping it short and keeping it focused. This session is on type 2 diabetes, and I want to avoid getting to a diabetic lecture, but I want to show you some examples. Now, like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game, the first question was designed to be pretty much a give me. But also I want to emphasize questions don't have to be these I gotcha moments or whatever. They certainly can be something that reinforces, here's a point I want you to walk away with. Now, most experienced test takers will know is if you don't know the answer down here, is it type 1, type 2, juvenile onset, etc. Well, the title of the session is type 2 diabetes. That's usually kind of a giveaway what the answer is going to be. And that's okay. This wasn't intended to be a gotcha question. It was intended to reinforce a teaching point. This session was set up as self-paced. I could actually turn around and make this instructor-led, which is how I designed it. And then I could actually have people interact directly with my presentation so I know what they know. I always like to go beyond the question and answers, and these 7 questions I can get through in about 10 to 12 minutes, 15 minutes on the top end. So again, focusing on keeping it short and to one point. So here, all we're talking about is type 2 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a different module in itself. As I indicated, I like to use preview slides. Here's a slide here that I'm going to set up the question. But again, the focus here is to get students to walk away with key teaching points. So they're going to go ahead and answer, and they can always go back if this is self-paced or review the preview. And they submit their answer. This is, again, intended as a short, brief, focused training session. And throughout the building of it, I'm re-emphasizing certain points. How the body loses sugar, the effect high blood sugar in the body, etc. Again, I don't want to make this a diabetic lecture. And then I can just emphasize key points and bring in summaries. It's a little bit different format than Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and that is there's more than one answer. And each of these answers is a bullet point for a lecture or a takeaway. So again, I'm going to that 70% rule. I'm going to make this interactive. I'm going to know what my students know, especially if it's a live session, and then I can talk about it and reinforce those key points they need to know. Well, that's it. I can continue on through the hierarchy here of questions, but I wanted to give you a basic idea of how I use microlearning within my training sessions. I've been a big fan of it for years, just never knew it was called microlearning. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. Until the next time, hope you always find unique ways to make your next presentation more engaging.